Hi Stitchers, welcome to Tatreez Talk, where we share conversations about Palestinian embroidery. I'm Lena, here with my co-host Amani, chatting with talented embroiderers and artists, sharing their stories, inspirations, and the cultural significance behind their work.
On today's episode, we're chatting with Nada of Nada's Ink on Instagram. You are all probably very familiar with her work. She is a professional visual artist that specializes in digital art and a recent amateur Tatreezer. Thanks for joining us on Tatreez Talk, Nada.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is amazing, Nada, because I already own several pieces of your art. So I am personally thrilled to have you on the podcast, especially since your art is very Tatreez and thobe inspired, but we'll get to that. We typically like to start episodes about just getting to know about you and your family's connection to Palestine. Do you mind sharing a bit with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. My family is from Serafand, my father's side, and my mother's side is from Nablus. Both of my parents grew up in Kuwait, as is the story for many displaced Palestinians. And then I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that's currently where I reside right now. I grew up always knowing that I'm Palestinian, and I've had like a connection to my culture, but I feel like a lot of my artwork kind of centers around strengthening that connection, because in a lot of ways, especially like in my later teenage years, I started to feel very disconnected from it. And so Tatreez is one of those things that brought me back to it and helped me reconnect and learn a lot about Palestine and my Palestinian identity in a way that I wasn't really expecting, especially because, you know, my connection primarily was through like artwork and illustration. And so, it wasn't until later that I started doing artwork, that I started incorporating like Palestinian culture and started getting into Tatreez itself. And it kind of like snowballed from there. The more that I learned, the more that I wanted to incorporate it. Yeah.
And can you, I guess, going in that direction, can you tell us a little bit about your personal Tatreez journey and how you started Tatreez and why you started Tatreez?
Yes. So as far as traditional like cross-stitching Tatreez, it was not until very recently, post-October, as you know, like it seems like Tatreez circles popped up all around the country and all around the world. And one was happening I was living in Raleigh at the time. So in the Triangle area, it was Samia, who I believe was a guest previously. Yes. She had posted like saying that they were going to have a Tatreez workshop. And so I went to that. And like immediately after taking that one class, I went to like Hobby Lobby the next day and bought a ton of like threads and like needles and all that, and I just started going at it. It kind of came easily to me. Like it was, I'm a very crafty person, I'd like to think. Like I love finding a new hobby. Usually what happens is that I find them and then I kind of end up discarding them not too much later once I'm like, okay, I've done this. But that hasn't really been the case with Tatreez. It's kind of been like a consistent thing that I pick up on when I kind of feel overwhelmed or burnt out on the art that I typically do. So it's been a really nice way to like refresh and kind of like, I like that you don't really have to think too much when you're following a pattern. And it's just something you can kind of do mindlessly, at least as far as like, you know, the actual practice goes. And so, yeah, that's when I started. And then as far as actual getting into Tatreez itself, it was, when I was doing artwork at first, I started, I think when I was like 18, going on 19. And I was taking like just some drawing classes, a couple drawing classes at my local community college, because I was majoring in international studies. And I wasn't allowed to take art classes at the university I went to because like I wasn't in that major. So I took a few classes at my local community college and just really fell in love with like art as a practice and specifically like illustration and portraiture and that kind of thing. And so a lot of my artwork at first was very like self-expressive. I don't really know how to describe it, but if you scroll down like my Instagram, you'll see it. It's kind of like journal-esque, sketchy kind of art. And a lot of that was like dealing through working through like feelings of like what I was going through at the time, but also I feel like you can kind of see it in that art as well. I was looking for connection and also expression, and I felt very like removed from my cultural identity at the time. And so I started making Palestinian specific art as a way to kind of get back in touch with that. I think I'd went to like someone's henna party or something. And I get this feeling every time I go to a henna night. Like I look around and like I hear the debka and the music and all the beautiful thobes and the headdresses. And it just like kind of makes me emotional.
Yes.
Like my heart feels like so full and like happy and like so lucky to be able to like witness that kind of celebration and liveliness of the culture. And that kind of remains the inspiration for when I make art today. And that's what kind of kickstarted it. I was like, oh, let me look up some thobes to draw and just like see what happens. And I wasn't expecting to like fully delve into that art at the time, but it just so happened that it ended up really being fulfilling and like people responded very well to it, which made me feel very affirmed in it. And so, yeah, I think most of the thobes at the time that I was first drawing, and some I didn't, a lot of them I didn't post, but I don't even think they were like Palestinian specific, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And at the time, that's something that I think everyone that gets into Tatreez starts to learn slowly as they delve into it, like what distinguishes Palestinian specific embroidery from other embroidery. And just learning that there was so much to that led me down the journey that I'm still currently on when it comes to representing that culture and learning about it and celebrating it.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned just now how you started drawing, but you weren't always drawing Palestinian specific thobes because you didn't realize that. What were kind of the resources and tools that you dove into to start learning more about the history and start getting the right resources and understanding this dress is from this region and so on and so forth?
Yes. So I didn't know at the time that like, I think this was honestly 2021, maybe 2020 to 2021 that I started doing this. And I had posted like a drawing or two. And I didn't know like the Tatreez community online was a thing until like I posted those drawings, and kind of that way I saw people, you know, engaging with my stuff that seemed to belong to this bigger thing that I had no idea existed. And so through kind of like exploring that and realizing first that like, okay, what I thought might be Palestinian or what I thought was traditionally Palestinian might not be the case. So I should like look into this as a principle of, you know, wanting to represent things authentically. And then, yeah, I looked up books. A lot of it, honestly, was like Google image back searching or whatever, like a certain motif and seeing what comes up and seeing if there's like enough like referential information to kind of confirm that. And that's what led me to learning about different books that I started ordering. But yeah, stumbling upon, I feel like the Tatreez community online especially kind of helped clarify and like make it pretty easier at least to find that kind of information that I was looking for.
That's amazing. I love that you have, I mean, I don't know if this was always what you've done, but you recently, I just bought it. It's next to me right now. You have actually like, it's art, but it's also kind of educational in a way, like to help people like point that this is a Palestinian thobe and this is what makes it a Palestinian thobe. And like, oh, also you can put it on your wall because it's beautiful. So I think that's amazing that you were able to kind of infuse that knowledge inside your art as well. Because I know that people are still starting to learn a little bit more. I mean, even like what you were talking about in terms of not realizing that it wasn't Palestinian when you first got started. Like, I think I went through that exact same, like that was super relatable because I think I went through that exact same thing. I feel like as Palestinians are generations removed from Palestine, you have a little bit of that loss of understanding because it doesn't become a part of your day to day. And I think we're starting to see people want to reclaim that back, and having, even if it's like, this is such a great tool to get into is through art as well.
Yeah, it had made me feel really silly coming to terms with that. Like, oh, I don't even know like what specifically is Palestinian. Like, there's a lot of shame around that, right? But I guess I've just come to understand that that's a natural consequence of, the effects of colonialism and occupation and trying to erase the culture. And so I don't know, I think it's something that most people do go through. At least like especially if you're raised in the West and you're a little more removed from those traditions, or if you're 2 generations removed. And so, yeah, it's a difficult thing to like parse, but I'm very thankful for like the sources online and especially the emerging community too, that helps like clarify everything that's muddied. And it feels, I think it's really important to know that Arab culture, especially when it comes to like textiles, isn't like this homogenized thing. It's almost like a Orientalist mindset that we internalize about our own culture. And so it's hard for us to distinguish things from it than from like surrounding countries. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful for the community for clearing up those distinctions.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you found the community to be like a helpful resource. And I think Lena and I both feel the same way when we say that the community has been really supportive of each other and of teaching and learning. And I love that because, I mean, that's what Tatreez is traditionally. It's an art form that was passed around within community as far as teaching. So that knowledge is for all of us, which I'm glad that you have been finding. And I'm curious now, since you have started actually practicing Tatreez, how has that changed the incorporation of Tatreez into your illustration and your digital art?
Yes. So I think that it's going to change it in future ways that I still haven't done, just in terms of like maybe incorporating more mixed media and doing actual Tatreez onto pieces is something that I've thought about for a while, or like, framing pieces with like maybe stitching a Tatreez kind of frame, like padding wise, I think would be super cool. But yeah, I think like physically doing Tatreez has made me pay more attention than I normally would, because now I'm on websites like, Tatreez, where I'm looking at actual motifs to stitch just for fun or for, reference. And so I feel like I pay more attention to the meanings or to the locations than I would have otherwise. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see how it influences future work. And I also am excited to like play and experiment with that now that I know what it is. I was so intimidated before getting into Tatreez about doing it. I thought it was like this super complex practice. And I think that, as far as like actual patterns are concerned, it's a real skill to have the creativity to see those things and be able to like make something beautiful out of it. And that's one that I still need to hone before I give it my own try of making my own patterns. But as far as like Tatreez itself, cross stitch, it's not as intimidating as it seems, on the surface. And so, yeah, I'm like super happy that all these workshops have popped up, because I think it's made it so much more accessible. And also I think a lot of people are kind of surprised by like how accessible the actual practice is, and you don't really need much to do it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I'm also curious, like, what's your approach to a project? Like, let's say the last project you did, how do you typically, it doesn't have to necessarily be Tatreez specific, but how do you approach your art? How do you create it?
Yes, so I have a lot of different inspirations, and I feel like I have to kind of make myself be in a creative mode. Like, inspiration doesn't necessarily just strike me randomly. I have to like kind of I have to intentionally like look things up, look, through my books, find images online, that kind of thing. And so my first part, I guess, is like looking for references, or sometimes like if I'm feeling particularly burnt out, I'll try to listen to like some Palestinian music, or maybe watch a film, something that'll kind of get that pride flowing in being Palestinian. And I think that's where my art mostly stems from, and that's why most of it ends up being celebratory, like in nature, is because it comes from a place of like when I'm feeling most inspired is when I'm feeling most like grateful for it, or yeah, just that kind of thing. And so yeah, typically I might flip through my books and look for a thobe that really catches my eye, and then I try to I usually play around with different compositions, and then the meaning kind of emerges as I'm playing around with it, like whether that thobe happens to be, the motifs and everything on it are particularly let's say they remind me, even if they don't necessarily represent, but they remind me of something that has to do with like landscapes or crops or that kind of thing, then I'll try to make a piece that is centered around like Palestinian crops, and then emphasize whatever feeling those dresses give me, whether it's like super colorful and vibrant, or something that is more spiritual and connected to nature, or something that feels a little more resilient and resistance kind of focused. That's kind of the direction that I'll end up going with. And so I don't really ever start a piece it's rare that I know what I'm doing before I do it. And I know that's not the way a lot of artists work, but it's definitely the way I work. Through playing with things and with concepts is when things start to take meaning and shape. And then that's where I'll go with it.
I like that, though. I am very, Lena knows this. I have to plan things out, and I wish I could be more free flowing. So I think that's a beautiful trait to have, especially as an artist. I feel like it doesn't limit you. I have a question for you about your artwork as well. I'm curious, because I feel like I see your artwork now, and I think we see it all over the place, especially within the Palestinian community. And I see your artwork and I know it's yours. And I'm curious, how would you describe your style, your artistic style?
Yes, thank you. I think when it comes to my style, I like to kind of keep it very contemporary and modern looking, because I feel like growing up, there are so many amazing Palestinian artists. I feel like I wasn't really exposed to much of it, though. And the artwork that I was exposed to that was Palestinian was definitely things made from, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that are beautiful and powerful pieces of art. But I wasn't really exposed to things that felt more present day, and something about that, they exist. I just would want to clarify, they definitely exist, but it wasn't really something that I saw much of within the corners of the internet I was in, or within my community. And so I wanted to make art that felt more present moment, because I feel like that says something about Palestine as a culture and as a people as well. I think people resonate with seeing something that feels like it's not just something of the past, it's something of the present. It's something that looks like, a lot of my inspirations kind of come from game illustration, concept art, and a lot of cultural character art. And so as far as stylistically, that's probably maybe what people pick up on, that they recognize as mine, because that's the kind of art that I've always thought was super fun and that I've been drawn to growing up. But yeah, it's definitely a modern look, and I don't think there's any inherent value to that, but I do think that I think it might be more recognizable for that reason to other people.
Do you think it makes it also accessible to non-Palestinian communities? Have you seen more or less success in the U.S. spaces that you're in from that approach, or that really doesn't have anything to do with it?
That is part of the reason I think as well that I chose it, is because, I don't know, I feel like all art is accessible to all communities, but I also pick up on what you're saying, in that I think it's more about maybe the nature of the subject than it is the subject itself. So a lot of Palestinian art that I was exposed to growing up was very much art that centered around our grief and our struggle and our liberation. And that stuff is so important to depict in art. However, I grew up as an American, and so my experience in relation to Palestine is very different than people that grew up there that, are dealing with everything that comes with living under occupation. And so I feel like when it comes to where I make art from, it's definitely from like this privileged position as a Palestinian here. That maybe is the reason why I tend to go for these more celebratory kind of depictions. I've been told that they're like nostalgic or like they're romanticizing or that kind of thing, which I don't know. I mean, you can interpret it or you can read it however you want to. But I do think that like the way other people view it definitely has a play into the way that I make it. And some of that has been like rather hesitant because I don't want to make art with like the priority being for non-Palestinians to see and engage with it in order to like recognize our humanity or recognize that our culture isn't just, defined by our occupation. Like there's more there's more to us than that. But it's been a hard balance to strike. I just try to remind myself that like, first and foremost, I'm making art for Palestinians and that other people respond to it and learn about Palestine from it is a bonus. And it's something I also want to prioritize. But the main priority is for Palestinians to have something and have art that they can relate fondly to when it comes to Palestine in a way that like inspires feelings of pride and celebration and even of nostalgia. I don't think that's a bad thing, rather than the more darker things that come with what it means to be Palestinian.
Yeah. So you said that people have talked about your art as like depicting this romanticized view of Palestine. I kind of love that because I think that as children of the diaspora, oftentimes, I mean, you started by saying that you went to a henna and you saw all these symbols of Palestinian celebration at this henna, and that kind of started inspiring you to create this art. And I think that as children of the diaspora, oftentimes that is when we have the most exposure to quote unquote traditional Palestinian culture. Like same as you, like I remember going to, hennas or going to Palestinian weddings. Even now, like I get all like, yes, I love this. Like, I love the traditions. Like it's so beautiful. And I think that we need a little Palestinian joy in our lives, and for that to come through from art, like, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. Okay, so, staying in this conversation about your artwork, and you mentioned, you are American, you grew up here, so you have this American lens that we can obviously relate to. So as someone currently in the U.S., what does it mean to make Palestinian-specific art while being a part of these local art scenes in American cities?
I don't put myself out into like more organized art spaces so much. Like I have my art community in Charlotte that are like friends, like good friends that are all, very pro-Palestine and like they get it. But then there are like, as far as like museums and galleries and like different art, like career type artist opportunities, it's definitely something that is difficult to juggle. If you're doing anything other than just kind of celebratory art. And I feel like while most of my art is that, I think I struggle a little internally with that, in that I don't want to just present it because it's palatable and people will accept it because it's palatable. Because I feel like it almost limits me or inhibits me from being able to make anything else if that is the kind of like art scene that I end up going down. Like I don't want to feel like censored in that way. And I mean, there's a lot of like quote unquote like progressive art spaces and galleries in the area and in the state. But, you know, I mean, it's been like 7 months of genocide in Gaza. I haven't seen a single art piece in any of these spaces that has anything to do with Gaza or Palestine. And I just feel like as places that love to like kind of steal the valor of like being on the right moral side of things after the fact, it's like both disappointing but not surprising when that is the case when you like are physically in these spaces. And so, yeah, I mean, I'll apply to things. I don't get them usually when it comes to, it depends on what I'm submitting. But, and I know that's like partly the nature of being an artist in general.
Yeah.
But it is hard to think that it doesn't also have to do with the fact that like my art is focused on Palestine in this specific moment.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'm curious too, since October, how has that changed or affected your art?
Yes. So I think that I definitely feel more of like a responsibility to kind of not just address or showcase the parts that have to do with like celebration and, you know, like the beautiful parts of being Palestinian, but also, you know, the struggle is very real. What Palestinians deal with is very real. I definitely think that now I feel more of a responsibility to represent parts of being Palestinian and Palestine that aren't just centered around the aspects of celebration in our culture and the beautiful things in our culture. I've recently kind of towed into that in terms of like depicting a little more resistance or pieces that are a little more like in the spirit of and supporting of like Palestinians rising up and resisting. And so it almost feels like kind of frivolous to make art about celebration now. And so I've had a difficult time doing that within the past few months because I'm just like, yeah, I can draw some thobes, but it almost feels like tone deaf to me when there is so much going on right now. And so it's definitely given me pause. And it's definitely made me kind of try to push myself internally as an artist as far as like getting creative with how I can depict things and what I can depict, what I should depict. And yeah, what are some creative ways that I can express the struggle and express support for the resistance in Palestine. I'm trying to figure out how to balance that, how to balance being able to still make art that has to do with celebration and pride and beauty while also making art that addresses the more pressing topics of today when it comes to the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, I know that we had a conversation with Iman from Hint of Tatreez recently, and one of the things that she had mentioned that is kind of along the same lines of which was when she had first started with sewing. That was what she actually got into first before she got into Tatreez, and then she realized that there wasn't really a space for her in the sewing community, and so I think that was part of the reason that she did less sewing and more Tatreez, because it was just like the easiest way to do art and identify and feel like you're in community and like people get it, right? But it sounds like what you're describing is kind of similar situation in that the art community that you're a part of is not necessarily, you know, they're not marching out with us protesting and are at the encampments, you know, at universities. But it's not really making you draw away from art. It's more like you are now thinking there is a role for you to play in the art scene. Because I've like one of the things that I've experienced over the last 7 months is like I can feel very angry and I can feel very frustrated and I can feel all of these things because of the genocide, but that doesn't necessarily mean I need to leave certain spaces. Sometimes it does, and I think there is value, but I think there's also value in kind of facing it on head on and like you showing up is bringing Palestine to the conversation, and I think that's really powerful. I guess like on this kind of same topic, are you working on anything right now? Do you have a spark of an idea that kind of toes that balance that you just described?
I have a few different things in the works. They're mostly like sketches, and they're mostly just kind of, exactly like you said, I do think there is value of still being in these communities because of the fact that they do bring Palestine to the conversation when they otherwise wouldn't. And so I guess that's why I'm like hesitant to make certain things, because I'm like, how am I able to insert myself that would be ultimately beneficial for representing Palestine in this space. And so, yeah, I'm trying to do things that I guess might be a little more subtle, but are hinting away from I'm not just drawing, beautiful dresses and relics from home for people to be like, oh, wow, Palestine actually is a beautiful culture. And I hate the idea that I would be playing into that kind of Orientalist view that I think white people might view Arabs as in general. They just want to consume the good parts of the culture, or not necessarily the good parts, but the parts that are palatable, and not really have to investigate the relationship with the parts that have to do with where there's strife and struggle. And so I guess to answer your question, I am trying to make art that hints a little more outside of just that, whether that is a little more narrative in terms of depicting things in Palestine, that it's not telling you what to think, or it's just depicting a reality, for example, and then you as a viewer can come away with your own conclusions, but it's a weird thing to tell, how much is too on the nose or will drive people away. Before even getting my foot in the door, I don't want to be denied, but it's definitely a juggle, but it's something that I'm excited to kind of tackle as an artist. And I think it's a good thing that I'm having this kind of difficulty figuring it out, because I don't just want to make art that's celebratory. And so if there's ever a time to push myself out of that and kind of beyond, it would be now, I would think.
I also feel especially just hearing the thought that you're already putting into it, I'm actually very excited to see what you come up with. Because I think it's I don't want to say it's the challenge of the artist, but I feel every artist and every genre and every part of life, they've always had this balance of beauty and reality, which sometimes is not beautiful. And I think even what we see out of Gaza, we see so much tragedy, but then we see these glimpses of Palestinian joy throughout the day, whether it's these adults who are doing what they can to bring little moments of joy to these children and dressing up and dancing with them and, having these little moments. It is this delicate balance. So I personally am very excited to see how you bring that balance of your traditional celebratory art with kind of this current reality. I think it is going to be very interesting, and I think it's going to push the beautiful work you already do to the next level.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, wait, I have another totally off topic, but it just crossed my mind. As our listeners know, I'm obsessed with the thobe in general, and this idea of creating your own unique design and storytelling through Tatreez. I'm wondering if you, through all of the art and all of the exposure that you've had to all these different types of a thobe, have you thought about creating your own thobe that is what you see as the ideal beauty for Nada?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have. It's just I feel there's so many beautiful thobe that I don't know if I could make one that's better. So part of me is why should I even try? But I do. The other part of me that loves to experiment and just have fun with things would want to give it a shot. I'm not really sure. There's so many different thobe styles, and I appreciate so many of them for themselves that it would be hard for me to just I don't know. I think that's the exciting part about Tatreez right now, is that there's so many people, including myself, that are kind of just coming to it, and it's it evolves with time. It's not just this stagnant art piece that is just that's how it is forever. It can only look like this forever. If you're Palestinian and you're making Tatreez in whichever way you want, that is an evolution of Tatreez in itself naturally. And so I would love to experiment in that way, and try to just have fun with it, but I'm not sure I have like the confidence of being able to go fully through it. Like I've never used waste canvas at all, just when it comes to the practicals of like making a thobe, you know?
Those are easy, Nada. Those are just the minor details. But like I would be curious, for example, if like you started off with like painting your dream thobe. Like I'm curious what that might look like. Maybe you've done that already. Have you done that?
I have not done that. I think it would be super cool, and it's probably going to be like a challenge I give myself now that I've been put on the spot. Within, like,
my pleasure.
Yeah, maybe I'll try that out. I think it would be super cool. I feel like it would be like I said, there's just so many perfect thwab. It's like, but like why bother? But also it would be cool to have like your own taste in it. And so, yeah, I'll give it a shot. You know what?
Okay, we're going to call you out on it.
Please do. Please do. That's the only way I'm like motivated to do things like that seem too intimidating to do. But yeah, no, it would be super fun, I think.
Nada, another question for you before we let you go. Are there any major life lessons that you've gained through Tatreez?
I think it's a reminder that all good things take time. Whatever the craft, whatever it is that you're doing, to like do it with love, and you'll see the fruits of it as it comes.
Definitely. That resonates. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we say goodbye, can you share with our listeners how they can follow you and get in touch and see your beautiful art?
Yeah, absolutely. I post my artwork on Instagram at Nada's Ink. That's INK, like drawing ink. I've been asked if it's like Nada Sink for some reason. I'm not. In case anyone had that misconception, it's Nada's Ink. And then my website is artbynadaesmaeel.com, and then my Etsy shop is also at Nada's Ink.
Great. Thank you so much, Nada. We cannot wait to see the beautiful art you continue to create and all your new Tatreez projects.
And the thobe.
Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you too so much for having me. And yeah, I will send you an update soon, Lina. I don't know if anyone else can see it because I'm not super confident in like that skill, but yeah, I'll get it done.
I can't wait.
We believe in you.